Hello, and welcome to this episode of Women in Engineering, Success Stories from STEM Professionals. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with Tershara Matthews, Senior Vice President and National Offshore Wind Policy Lead at WSP USA, to talk about the rapidly evolving field of offshore wind in the U.S., strategies to enhance offshore wind capabilities in the U.S. We'll also discuss her experience as a woman in engineer and energy policy and how her background in public health and biology informs her approach to environmental and energy policies. I am your host, Tiffany Teachy, a senior mechanical engineer, STEM advocate, TEDx international speaker, and an internationally recognized author of children's books, including What Can I Be? STEM Careers from A to Z, and the STEM Crew Kids Adventure Series. I also host the Read It Right radio show on WDRB Media, owner of Thrive Edge Publishing, and owner, publishing consultant of Inspired Authors Publishing. And with that, let's jump right into today's episode. Today, I have with me Tershara Matthews. Tershara, welcome to the Women in Engineering podcast.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career path that led you to your career role as National Offshore Wind Policy Lead at WSP.
Yes, thank you. So in college, I was biology pre-med. I actually got accepted into medical school, and I did what is called a pre-matriculation program the summer prior to me going. And my first rotation was in the ER. And my first patient had been in a terrible car accident. And that's when I realized that maybe this is not for me. I found myself backing up away from the patient towards the wall. And I was like, I don't think this is for me. Luckily, they had the University of Southern Mississippi, which was near my home. And I applied for a job there. And they used marine biology is their focus. And so I started working with shrimps and crabs, and my parents was like, okay, how is this going to make an impact? And how do you go from medical school to working with shrimps and crabs? But the important thing is that we had a huge grant that we were working on looking at the viruses that were happening in the shrimp and the crab aquaculture, because, there's a huge demand for seafood in the U.S. And so but the crops were dying and they were losing millions of dollars. And so our goal was to figure out how to best stop losing those crops. And so the DNA analysis of those of the viruses is what I worked on. And then we also did some stock enhancements as well. So that's how I started. And I said, well, I'm tired of trying to look for grants. Now I want to be able to give out the grants. So I applied for an internship. Then it was called the Marine Mineral Service, and later became the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And they did oil and gas offshore. I kind of worked my way up, and the last 3 years of my career with the federal government, I ran the Renewables Energy Program for the Gulf of Mexico. And also I had the Marine Minerals Program as well, which was like a coastal restoration program, which I loved. And so WSP noticed the work that I was doing, and they reached out to me about joining their team.
Offshore wind is a rapidly evolving field. Can you provide an overview of how it's currently developing as an energy option in the U.S.?
Yeah, so offshore wind is definitely emerging very quickly. I think that's because of the current administration is really pushing the 30 gigawatts by 2030 is their goal. And so the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is working really hard to make sure that they're offering those lease sales throughout the country. And so with those lease sales, companies are actually able to go out and purchase those leases, and so to increase the offshore wind that's in the U.S. Currently, they're going to have 4 sales this year, one in the Gulf of Mexico, one in the Central Atlantic, one in the Gulf of Maine, and also off of Oregon as well. So that's going to increase the amount of offshore wind tremendously in the U.S. So I'm really excited to see what the next few years look like after these sales and the other companies purchasing the leases, how that's going to increase the industry itself.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, that's important as far as increasing and making an impact. So thank you for sharing that. Now, what are some of the most innovative policies or projects you've been involved with at the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and now at WSP?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, by working in the Gulf of Mexico region for BOEM, we did things a little bit different than they had done on the Atlantic. There was a lot of lessons learned. And so one of the things that we did was work closely with NOAA to better find out how can utilize their marine spatial planning. And so what we did was we created a model looking at existing oil and gas infrastructure, because the Gulf is a little different than the other regions throughout the country. You do have some oil and gas infrastructure off of the Pacific, but the Gulf has the most. And so we had to look at where do we already have infrastructure so that you can't, place things over things. And where are we fishing? What are the trends of the fishing? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Looking at that historical data. Where are the populations of the marine mammals? Where are they located so that we make sure that we're not interrupting their habitat and their ecosystems? And so we utilize this marine spatial planning to find out what's the most deconflicted areas for offshore wind. And so the Gulf of Mexico, we were the first region to actually enact this program. And now BOEM is utilizing it throughout the other regions as well. And how do we get that data? Not only did we get it from NOAA, but we also had, BOEM also had in-house data that they utilized, but we also got a lot of feedback from the public itself to better understand the migratory birds path. Those are a lot of the questions that we were receiving. And so once we got that, we ran the model, and then they were able to come up with these deconflicted areas. And so now I'm able to take that information and utilize that in helping my clients to best situate their wind farms as they're moving through the process for their site feasibility studies, utilizing that information to help them better understand the areas that's most deconflicted.
Wow, I love it. I love it. I'm learning so much as far as ocean. I so much involved with this. So thank you for breaking it down and sharing it with us.
Yes.
Now let's get into, as a woman, how have you navigated the challenges and opportunities of being a woman in a predominantly male field of engineering and energy policy?
Yeah, it has been difficult. I will say I was, after Deepwater Horizon hit, as I mentioned earlier, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management was formerly the Marine Minerals Service. And so after Deepwater Horizon and the Obama administration, the agency was split into two agencies. They have BSEE, which is handling the safety and enforcement, and then they had the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And that created tremendous amount of opportunity inside the agency. So I was the first African-American female supervisor in the Office of Environment. Actually, I think it was in the Bureau for the Gulf of Mexico region. But I don't take that very lightly. It was very hard to get there. And not everyone was happy, I would say. But I just continued to work hard, continue to do what I do. And but still today, I will say that I'm still probably the only African-American female in a lot of boardrooms. And so this field has more women in the field than in traditional oil and gas. But however, we're not there yet. And so my goal is to advocate for more women to not only be in the blue collar roles, but also to be in the boardrooms. And how do you do that? By educating and letting them know that this field even exists. As I mentioned earlier, my parents wanted me to go to medical school, and I can't fault them for that because they didn't know that this even was going to exist. And so how can you plan that or hope that for your child and you don't know about this new transitions, energy transition? So I'm excited to make sure that we get the message out so that while they're in school, that they can actually start learning more about this program and they can be a part of it.
Yes, that's it. It says there's so much work to still be done. Thank you for representing, and yes, and for the work that you're doing to continue to grow it and allow more to be in the room. And so,
yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, let's go into, as the National Offshore Wind Policy Lead, what strategies are you focusing on to enhance the U.S. offshore wind capabilities?
Yeah, so I am working closely with some states to help them to build out their offshore wind program, especially the states where they know that they're going to have or wanting to have offshore wind off of their coast. And I feel like supply chain is so important to make sure that we have equitable and diverse workforce and supply chain as well. And then we go back to the workforce, making sure that they have certifications and maybe possibly bringing in those historically Black colleges and universities and also minorities serving universities, making sure that those colleges or institutions are included in their plan so that they are reaching out to them and they'll be on the forefront of this movement instead of being on the back end. Oil and gas, a lot of times I feel like our communities, underserved communities actually missed out on those opportunities because they didn't know that those jobs exist. So we want to make sure we bring them in at the beginning and in a part of those state programs that they are actually included. And so that's my goal. And that's what I've been working with some of the states on.
That's amazing. I mean, it's good that you're bringing it in and making it be aware. So I love how you're doing that as well. Now let's go into, the relationships as far as how do you see the relationship between offshore wind and transmission issues? And what are the key considerations for integrating these systems efficiently?
Yeah. So after we had to develop the wind energy areas and we deconflicted them, I had a conversation with someone from the state of New Jersey, and he said there were a lot of lessons learned off of their coast as well. And where we should have probably started was with transmission. And I had to actually agree with him because if we had looked at where there was points of interconnections where we could actually put the power to the grid and then moved offshore to find out where those best areas probably would have been a better method. But now we're here where we are. And so there have been studies that have been conducted with not only through NOAA, but also through the National Renewable Energy Lab, looking at where can you actually bring this power back and where can you bring it back cost effectively? Because what you need to have is population centers. Because if you have all this power and there's no one to use it, then you just waste it. You wasted a lot of energy. And so you have to look at where those population centers, where can it actually fit into the grid, and how much is that going to cost? Because you need to make sure you're also not destroying any ecosystems as you move those cables back to shore. So there's a lot of things that need to be considered. So what they're doing now is currently the Atlantic has a transmission plan. I want to say the state of California has also issued a plan for transmission. And I want to say the Gulf of Mexico will probably be next looking at their transmission plan to where we can bring this power back and utilize it best. And so I do feel that there is a great marriage there. We just have to work together to figure it all out.
Wow, you got wealth of knowledge. I love it.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. So can you share how your studies in public health and biology have informed your approach to environmental and energy policies?
Yeah, so in order to have a successful project, you have to start with the public. You have to engage them early and often and get them involved so that they can better understand what's happening off their coast and what's in it for them. That's what they want to know. How is this going to impact my life? How is it going to change? Is it going to increase my rates? Is it going to impact my health? And I feel like me having a public health degree and also biology, I'm better to understand the dynamics of those communities, understanding what the baseline of those communities are prior to us going there. When I was formerly with BOEM, we did a tremendous amount of stakeholder engagement and outreach, especially for the renewable energy program. I either conducted, held, or presented at least 185 meetings within a year and a half to better understand those needs, to better understand the communities and what they wanted and what they didn't want. Prior to that, when on the oil and gas side, we did a tremendous amount of work for the geological and geophysical surveys for oil and gas on the Atlantic. And there was a lot of information that we received from meeting with those communities. And so that's key. And I feel like the public health degree and the biology helped me to better relate to those communities and to understand what they didn't want and understand what they felt like they needed.
That's good. That's where to get the polls and surveys and see what, get the voice of the people and make sure you're on the right track. I love that as far as the research. And that's important, getting them
Very
involved
important.
because, yeah, very much so. Thank you for sharing how you go about doing that, and especially with your background as well with the studies. Now,
Yeah.
what final piece of advice can you share with young engineers, especially women, who are looking to make a significant impact in the engineering world?
Yeah. So there were some things I wish I would have done at my younger age. Believe it or not, I am kind of shy. And so I wish at the conferences that I was attending, instead of me surrounding myself with the same circles, that I reached out more to start building that network. And so those were some missed opportunities. And so now I'm having to work a little harder, I feel, to help establish those connections and build that network and community. So I would recommend, as they attend these conferences or go in for their jobs, if they have them, or even if as a student, try to build those connections. LinkedIn, I receive a lot of questions and asking for meetings on LinkedIn, and I take those because I want to be a resource to the younger generations and to help them to better understand how can they get into this industry. The other thing is to find a mentor. That's very, very key in their job setting, either at the university that they may be attending, or if they do have an internship that they're fortunate to have, make sure that they stay in contact with the person that's supervising them and mentor them as well. And so those are the things that I recommend. Definitely networking, because with small circles, I run into the same people a lot of times at these conferences. And so we continue to see each other. It's like, hey, didn't I see you at the other conference? And we exchange cards and make those connections through LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is very helpful. As a government employee, when I was a former government employee, I didn't utilize it as much. But now that I'm in the private sector, I utilize it every day, making sure that I'm connecting with people on LinkedIn.
Okay, and that's how I was going to end it. How could people learn more about you or find out more or get in touch with you? And I don't know, you probably mentioned it just now, but can you share how people can get in touch with you and learn more from you?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tershara Matthews. And if you want to reach out to me on WSP's website, you can reach me at tershara.matthews@WSP.com.
Love it. Love it. Tershara, thank you so much. You're full of wealth. You've dropped so many gems. And so thank you for representing and doing the things that you do, and keep up the great work.
And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with inspiring women engineers, discussions about industry trends, and much more. Go to womeninengineeringpodcast.com, where you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, may your engineering endeavors be as remarkable as the women whose stories we're sharing. Stay curious, keep innovating, and engineer a better future.